Throughout history, there's been a hell of a lot of criminals, and the biggest criminals, like Pablo Escobar, demanded the biggest, most expensive mansions to conduct their shady dealings in. Most of these abominable abodes lie abandoned now. But what are they actually like? Let's find out as we go inside the abandoned mansions of the most notorious criminals. Manuela Mansion. You've probably heard of Pablo Escobar, the Colombian supercriminal that founded the Medellin cartel, one of the most notorious criminal enterprises in the world. Through a wealth of nefarious schemes, Escobar amassed a colossal fortune of an estimated $30 billion by the early 1990s, and one of Escobar's most famous properties, La Manuela, shows just what that kind of money can buy. Looks a little worse for wear now, doesn't it? But this estate in Guatape, Colombia, was once Escobar's pride and joy. He even named it after his daughter. So surely nothing bad happened here, right? Well, as innocent as it looks now, the walls of this stately home were built to be double layered, so they could be filled to the brim with cash and illicit substances. Damn. And to protect the super stash, Escobar hired an intimidatingly vast private army of henchmen that patrolled the place. I'm talking 120 of the burly guys. However, they weren't enough to stop anti-Escobar vigilante group Los Pepes. In 1993, members of the group managed to sneak into one of the bathrooms with over 400 pounds of TNT and blow the house to smithereens. I bet it needed a little more than 5 minutes in there after that explosion. Ever since, the once grand mansion has been in steady decline, reduced to rubble as nature slowly claims it for its own. Though it's not completely abandoned. It's actually been set up as a paintball venue. For a little over $50, you two can run around pretending to be a narco. I wonder what Pablo would have thought of that. As for all the hidden cash, well, it was seized by the police. So you won't have any luck going on a treasure hunt here. The only things you're likely to find are bullet holes. Ugh. Hacienda del Hippo. Even criminal kingpins need a place to put their feet up from time to time. And for Don Pablo, that place was the Hacienda Nápoles, located in Puerto Triunfo, Colombia. The huge site is nearly 8 square miles and had double pools, a private airstrip, and even a bull ring. But Escobar didn't settle for just that. Oh no, he also used the land to exhibit his enormous collection of exotic animals, including, you guessed it, hippos. I'm sure they'd have enjoyed the pool, but man, I'd really hate to see the state of the yard back when they were around. The mansion itself would have been significantly less poopy though. You wouldn't think it now, but the huge Spanish colonial-inspired villa was decked out with gold ornaments, statues, and fine fabrics. It all sounds a bit gaudy to me, but considering Escobar was earning $60 million a day, I'm sure he wouldn't have cared what I think. Nowadays, though, next to nothing of the old villa remains. After his death in 1993, a dispute arose between the Colombian government and the Escobar family over ownership of the estate, and it was left uninhabited. Eventually, the whole thing collapsed in 2015, and it's since reopened to the public as a theme park. Pretty far removed from a kingpin's estate then. Though Escobar's cars and the first plane he used to smuggle, goods to the U.S. are still there as reminders of the place's dark past. Are you running away from your dark past? Well, just hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I guarantee I'll give you a constant stream of amazing content to distract you from your inner demons. All done? All right then, onwards! Unholy Cathedral. You'd think the last place a supercriminal would want to be is prison, right? Well, in Pablo Escobar's case, think again. By 1991, Escobar was sick of running from the police, and they were sick of trying to catch him. So they struck up a deal. Escobar would surrender as long as he got to design his own prison. Oh boy. Unsurprisingly, the prison old Escobar came up with wasn't exactly your standard affair. Nope, it was decked out with state-of-the-art TVs and stereo equipment, a private helicopter pad, and huge games room. And just look at the bedroom! quite a step up from your standard prison cell. The so-called prison, named La Catedral, was built on top of a huge mountain on the outskirts of Medellin in Colombia. It was so steep that ground attacks were near impossible, and any potential aerial attacks would have been hindered by a thick layer of intermittent fog. So it wasn't so much about keeping Escobar in as it was keeping his enemies out. If it was so impenetrable then, why did it end up abandoned? Well, after just a year, reports emerged that people were going missing. The Colombian government knew Escobar was responsible, so they broke off the agreement. Special forces raided the complex, and although the kingpin managed to escape, the place was left eerily abandoned. Before long, opportunistic looters had torn it apart to look for hidden treasures. But then, in a wild twist, a group of Benedictine monks gained possession of the site in 2007 and built a chapel on it. So, finally, La Catedral is living up to its name. Oh, the irony. Monaco Madhouse. When the Netflix show Narcos became such a big hit, the Colombian city of Medellin, where Escobar operated, became a huge tourist hub for people looking to learn more about him. And a popular stop on many tours was the safe house Escobar survived one of his many assassination attempts in. Known as the Monaco Building, the drab-looking tower used to house a swath of luxury apartments. Not that you'd know that now. While Pablo's lawyer negotiated the terms of his 1990 surrender agreement, the man himself stayed in the penthouse suite with his family. Back then, the pool and tennis courts outside would have looked a lot nicer than this, though the kingpin was in no position to hang outside and relax. Escobar had made many enemies while he ruled over his criminal empire, and had to take extreme security measures while he hid away, like having a walk-in safe installed in his room. And it's a good job, too, because after his former mistress accidentally gave away his location, Escobar's bitter rivals, the Cali cartel, were onto him fast. Cartel members loaded up a whopping 800 pounds of dynamite into a car, parked it in the car part of the building, and set it all off. Despite the immense destruction, incredibly nobody died. But Pablo's daughter, Manuela, was made permanently deaf in one ear. If you fancy checking out the gloomy building for yourself, though, I'm afraid you can't. In 2019, what was left of it was demolished by the Colombian government in an attempt to rid Medellin of its violent past. Personally, I'm not too bothered. I'd rather visit somewhere without suspicious stains. Secluded Chateau. A little off the coast of Colombia sits an obscure archipelago called the Rosario Islands. One of these islands, La Isla Grande, holds a dark secret. But if you want to get there to find out what it is, you'll have to spend hours canoeing through the dense mangrove swamps around it. Then, if you're very persistent, you might catch a glimpse of white stone. That'd be La Casa Grande. And you guessed it, it's another of Escobar's curious abodes. The crumbling mansion is totally off-grid. It doesn't even appear on Google Maps. In its heyday, there would have been hundreds of armed guards patrolling it, with strict instructions to shoot on sight. So, what exactly was Pablo trying so hard to hide? Well, his 300-bed party palace, of course, with waterfront apartments for guests, a swimming pool, and, why not, a helicopter pad. This place was the definition of excessive. And you can bet Pablo and his pals got up to all kinds of debauchery in there. It doesn't look like it now, but there are rumors that all the bathrooms had solid gold shower heads. Which might sound crazy, but this place was owned by the same man who spent $2,500 a month on rubber bands. Any guesses why? To wrap up all his money with. Jeez. It's safe to say this once illustrious mansion definitely doesn't have any gold in it anymore. But there are a group of wild boar that wander the area, although the place is anything but boring. Desolation in Davie. By now you might have guessed, Pablo Escobar owned a lot of houses. Over the years, he managed to acquire over 140 luxurious mansions, which various media sources have approximated at over $10 billion of total value. Because of this, and Pablo's proclivity for secrecy, any mysterious old mansion could be the subject of Escobar-related myths. Take this one in Davie, Florida. Locals claim the property was purchased by the kingpin back in 1980 for the relatively modest sum of $762,000. I mean, it certainly looks like the kind of place I can imagine him mooching around in. In reality, though, it's unlikely he ever set foot here. However, the truth is no less far-fetched. The property was actually purchased by one Jose Puello Montoya in 2002 for $2.5 million. He didn't exactly own it for very long, though. Just 1 year later, it was seized by the government. Why? Apparently, Jose was no less shady than Pablo, and had bought the mansion with money he'd earned smuggling illicit substances. That big hole in the roof isn't the result of some botched assassination attempt, though. It's just a half-baked demolition job. Even so, the spooky ruin remains the topic of much discussion today. Some people even believe it's haunted. I don't know about that. You wouldn't even catch me dead in there. Hotel Pablo. Do you think you're brave enough to spend the night in one of Escobar's creepy abandoned properties? I'm certainly not. But I might brave a stay in Casa Malca in Tulum, Mexico. That's because this flashy property was transformed into a luxury art hotel back in 2015. Back in the day, it was supposedly a gift to Escobar from fellow smuggler Amado Carrillo Fuentes, though others reckon Escobar bought the land himself. After his empire collapsed in 1993, though, the mansion was abandoned, changing hands multiple times until it was eventually bought for $17.5 million and transformed into the jazzy establishment it is today. The whole place is built around the main rooms of the old kingpin's house, and while any pre-renovation pics have been lost, we can speculate it might have looked something like this when it was first discovered. I mean, Pablo did have a taste for expensive, ugly furniture. Nowadays, of course, it looks a whole lot nicer. But a stay here doesn't come cheap, at up to $840 a night. Looks like I'm sleeping on the beach. Cartel Crib. Think back a minute or so, and you might remember me mentioning one Amado Carrillo Fuentes. You know, the guy who supposedly gave Pablo the mansion that became Casa Malca. Seems like a wonderful guy, right? Wrong. Fuentes was actually the leader of the Juarez cartel, and liked nothing more than kicking back and hosting parties in his Mexico City mansion. Look at it now. You wouldn't think this place had such a shady occupant, but it makes you wonder what went on in here behind closed doors. Did this long-drained swimming pool once hold the bodies of the men that wronged Fuentes? And what's up with the playhouse outside? Nothing says creepy quite like an abandoned playhouse. Nope, you wouldn't have caught me in this place, no matter how big the party was supposed to be. And apparently, people agree with me. The mansion was auctioned for $2 million back in 2020, but the sale fell through, and it was instead made a prize in a national raffle, with tickets costing just $12.50. That's right, you too could have netted yourself a sleepless night for the same price as a burrito. Arabian Frights. For a crime lord like Fuentes, one house could never be enough. Although, considering how elusive he tried to be, it's interesting he'd live somewhere like this. I suppose narco also means narcissistic. Fuentes didn't actually ever live here, though, as partway through its construction it was seized by the police, and the narcotics smuggler later died. Left abandoned in 1994, the pseudo-Arabian palace was quickly overtaken by squatters and vandals, who, as you can see, redecorated it a bit. Understandably, authorities scheduled the eyesore for demolition back in 2020, but during the job, workers got a fright when they found a giant network of tunnels crisscrossing beneath the entire 27,000-square-foot home. I mean, if my house looked like that, I'd want to hide underground too. Though the tunnels weren't dug to hide people, they were made to facilitate Fuentes' illegal smuggling activities. Or maybe he just really liked playing hide-and-seek. Who knows? Temple of Corruption. At first glance, you might think this is the ancient Greek Parthenon in Athens. But no, this abandoned abode stands high on the hills overlooking Zihuatanejo Bay in Mexico. And it's only been abandoned for decades, not centuries. So what gives? Well, there's a good reason nobody lives here. Its previous owner was Arturo Durazo Moreno. Mexico's infamous chief of police between 1976 and 1982. Whilst his day job earned him less than $1,000 a month, his, let's say, side hustle made him more than enough to build this exceedingly extravagant villa. What was his side hustle then? Well, just converting the whole Mexico City police force into a racketeering empire. Okay. The corrupt chief pocketed the entire police budget for himself, made allies with top criminals, and used taxpayers' money for his own egotistical purchases. The most egotistical of these was his Mexican villa, El Parthenon, featuring pillars imported directly from Rome, classical statues, and some rather questionable art. He spent millions of unlawful money on it, and he hosted many a debauched party there too, from which some of his guests never came back from. Well, there's not a lot of parties going on at El Parthenon anymore. It's lain abandoned since Moreno's downfall in 1982 and subsequent arrest 2 years later. A sad reminder of a man who clearly thought himself untouchable. It seems only things truly untouchable are those weird paintings. Yet not even looters are interested in those. Greenhouse. Not all abandoned mansions were owned by international criminal kingpins. Some were owned by, well, just criminals. Like this exuberant abode in Kings Township, Ontario. Looks pretty nice, right? If in need of a little TLC. But when this place was bought up for $1.7 million back in 2012, it looked pretty damn nice. Quickly, however, it gained a dark reputation. Shortly after its purchase, neighbors started complaining of strange smells coming from inside, and even called a meeting about it. And just hours after that meeting, a mysterious fire ripped through the residence, leaving it a shadow of its former self. Apparently, that waterfall wall didn't do much to stop the flames. At the time, authorities blamed the fire on an electrical fault. But after reading up on this place, the truth might be far more sinister. The guy who bought it had started growing some, devil's broccoli in there. That was the smell the neighbors had complained of. And though the fire may have been an accident, I can't help but wonder if those neighbors had something to do with it. There are rumors aplenty about this creepy place, and some people speculate the grow-up was restarted by a couple of estate agents after the fire. So maybe they set it to get rid of the competition? We may never truly know, because the whole mansion was demolished in 2017 to rid the area of the negative attention. But that only makes me more suspicious. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. Terror Towers. The UK's capital city, London, isn't known for being cheap. So if you dropped $40 million on a mansion on one of its most expensive roads, the last thing you'd do is abandon it, right? Well, if you visit Billionaires Row in Hampstead Heath, you'll find just such an abandoned mega house. In fact, you'll find loads. The road hosts a mile-long stretch of them, worth a whopping $440 million in total. And that's just the abandoned ones. The biggest of them all is The Towers, an exceedingly creepy property that was bought by a Saudi Arabian royal back in 1989 and then just left to decay. Half the house is infested with mold, ferns are growing from the staircase, and the landing is absolutely covered in bird droppings. Once upon a time, you could imagine the pool was beautiful, but now it looks like something out of a horror film, which is a vibe that's only exacerbated by Billionaire Row's dark past. From strangely secretive occupants to political plots, and even an unsolved murder, the road's got it all. And it reeks of macabre mystery. As for The Towers, well, all we know is the occupants bought a load of bulletproof glass, then failed to ever install it. Pretty suspicious if you ask me. Do you know anything about this enigmatic row of mansions? Let me know down in the comments. In the clear. Imagine you're walking through the woods. Then, suddenly, the ground gives way beneath you, and you plummet several feet to a painful demise. Ouch. Looking at it from above, you might expect that to happen if you accidentally trod on this camouflaged mansion. It's almost entirely made from glass. Don't worry, though. The roof isn't, so you wouldn't be in any real danger. Still, this odd abode in Leesburg, Virginia looks like the perfect hideout for a supervillain. Of course, supervillains aren't real, but there are some very questionable rumors about the abandoned property, like it being used as a base for making black market substances. If you ask me, you'd have to be pretty stupid to run a supply ring from a clear glass mansion, though. There's not exactly a lot of privacy. Apparently, the property was built by a Saudi prince in 1979 after he bought the 2,000-acre estate for over $5 million. But others dispute that claim, and the building is so shrouded in mystery that nobody really knows for sure. Why would such a unique property have been left to rot like this? Maybe the original owner of these bones knew before they were permanently silenced for being privy to such information. Or maybe they're just animal bones. Regardless, the history of this place is a lot murkier than its transparent walls would suggest. Frightful Flass. In the north of England, on the outskirts of the unassuming village of Mauld's-Meeburn, lies an imposing stone monster. No, mythical columns don't exist, but this creepy abandoned 19th century mansion does. It's called Flass and was originally built by a pair who sold, seriously strong painkillers. So it was pretty sketchy from day one. In recent years, though, that reputation has got even sketchier. The place was bought in 2000 by a musician and her husband, Paul Davies. During their ownership of the property, the couple divorced, and a few years later, the dark truth came out about Paul. Neighbors became suspicious after hearing the loud humming of generators whenever they got near the property, and nobody ever seemed to be in. It turns out, Paul had been loaning the secluded house to a criminal gang so they could grow some rather illegal houseplants, nearly $6.5 million worth to be precise. Paul and the gang were thrown in jail, and the property was left to fester. After that, the decrepit building became a popular destination for urban explorers, many of whom looted and vandalized the property. Because of its questionable past, the mucky mansion proved difficult to sell, but in 2019, it was eventually purchased for almost $600,000. Not a bad price, but this place needs a lot of renovations, and even then, no amount of paint will cover up its tainted history. Gotti's Got. If you're a fan of questionable reality TV that doubles as a hair gel commercial, you might have seen Growing Up Gotti. The show followed Victoria Gotti and her family, relatives of notorious American gangster John Gotti. And it all took place in this multi-million-dollar mansion in Long Island, New York. It seems being related to a mobster has its privileges, but the once swanky party pad is now little more than a desolate wasteland. So what the heck happened? Well, it turns out the Gottis hadn't been paying the mortgage for their grand home, and after a series of scandals accumulating in a police raid, they were forced to leave back in 2016. The place has been eerily empty ever since. If the abandoned pool and derelict basketball court aren't spooky enough for you, though, the hordes of neglected possessions might be. Everything seems to just have been left, as if the Gotti family had just disappeared one day mid-hair gel application. Although, I can see why they left that. Unsurprisingly, nobody seems interested in buying all this junk, and so despite her best efforts, Victoria has failed to sell the place. Instead, it lingers on like a bad smell. Which reminds me, I should probably go to the restroom. Alright then, I'm off. Which of those abandoned abodes was your favorite? And have you ever gone urban exploring anywhere similar? Let me know down in the comments below. And thanks for watching.